Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Attractions Group podcast. It's episode number 37. Don Helbig joined by the peripatetic Ryan Sir. Ryan, you're getting ready to go on another trip to Tennessee this week. What are you looking to do while you're there?
Well, I'm willing to stop by Bucky's if you want me to. I know that they probably have a shipment for you of Bucky's Hawaiian shirts and mugs and onesies and so on. Kind of exciting one. Swinging by Dollywood. Actually spending a couple days there. But the real highlight is that we are only for one night, but we are spending one night at the Dreammore Resort, which has been a bucket list thing for me. So really excited to do that. I really want to see it. It's kind of legendary already, and I don't know many people that have actually stayed there. It books up very quickly, and we're just lucky to have it. We just needed a place to stay on Thursday, so we decided to splurge. So Dollywood the other days, Big Bear Mountain will not be open. So darn, another excuse to go down to Dollywood later this year. But we're actually seeing the Hatfields and McCoy's dinner show on Thursday night. So I'm really looking forward to that because that's been something I've wanted to do.
You mentioned the Hatfields and McCoys. Interesting note, by marriage, I am related to the McCoy side of that family.
Yes, in Kentucky, the Kentucky.
In Kentucky,
I made sure
correct,
to buy
yes.
tickets on the McCoy side because I did not want to sit on the Hatfield side because I'm still mad about this.
Yeah, that's a little fun fact.
Awesome. Well, so for those of you who are new, welcome. You can follow us on Twitter at attractions_GRP. We are so close to having 500 followers. Once we hit 500 followers, Don's going to give away another prize, but it's not going to be a surprise this time. He authorized me to tell you what it is, and it's going to be a boysenberry pin from Knott's Berry Farm. So yeah, move it over. There we go. I didn't even know you had it in hand right now, but that's cool.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
those pins are awesome. I got tons of them from Kings Island and Kings Dominion, but so we're just a couple away. So we're gonna pick one random Twitter follower to get the boysenberry pin. Um, so you can find us on your favorite audio apps for podcasts. That's Spotify, Apple, Google, and so on. And if you want to see our handsome faces as well as the very handsome face of our guest today, then look for us on YouTube. Just search for the Attractions Group podcast. So speaking of Twitter, Don, you've grown your followers by like what 1,400, 2,400 in the last couple weeks. What do you
Yeah,
attribute that to?
2,300. I think just doing the Attractions Group podcast, just people listening to it, and they just decide they want to follow along.
That was my guess too. All right, Don, who's our guest today?
Well, Arthur Levine, he's an expert in all things related to theme parks and shares his insights and experience on his Substack. It's called About Theme Parks. And Ryan, you and I love reading his post and learning about the latest news in the industry. And if you're listening to this podcast, you will too. So make sure you check it out. Arthur, you're our first repeated guest. Welcome back to the Attractions Group podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to be the first guy that got the call back, I guess.
Yeah, we hope to have you on many times more as we keep moving into the future here.
Sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had people that we interviewed at IAPA on, so we have had people on more than once, but you're our first to be on 2 full episodes, so that makes you an A-lister in my book. So, so Arthur, since getting to know you the last time you're on the podcast in December, I've been reading your Substack and following your tweets and stuff, and I've really enjoyed them. We're going to talk about some of the material that you've come out with. You ready to dive into that?
Sure. Let's do it. And for folks who are interested, if they want to reference these articles, they can find me on aboutthemeparks.fun. That's .fun. I didn't realize that was a URL, but it actually is.
And that will be linked in the description as well.
Great.
All right, Arthur, we'll get started with a recent article that you did. It's called Take a Ride Back in Time, and it's counting down the 10 oldest amusement parks still operating in the United States, and all of them date to the 19th century. Share with our listeners your list of the 10 oldest parks in the country.
Sure, but maybe before we do that, I just wanted to say that these parks kind of have a special place in my heart. I really get a huge kick out of these classic parks, and one of the reasons why I think is, we live in a world that's constantly changing, and it seems to be evolving ever quicker these days. And there's something comforting about places like the parks that we're going to be talking about that have been around for well over 100 years, some of them 150 years. And the fact that they're still here and still providing fun, and they provide this wonderful link to the past, and multiple generations have gone there. I find that very comforting, and something that just gives me a great deal of pleasure. And I also wanted to say that they're a wonderful example of what I see as a very odd juxtaposition about what it is about amusement parks and theme parks that we love. On the one hand, I think people love them because of their nostalgic appeal, because maybe they went there when they were a child, or maybe their parents and their grandparents went there, and it's been this, multi-generation experience, and they love going back and maybe introducing their own children to it. So there's this tremendous nostalgic appeal. At the same time, parks have always been, and even these parks that we're going to be talking about, they've always been places that have showcased the latest technology. It's the place where we go to experience things at scale that maybe we've only read about in magazines back in the day, or maybe we only, hear about in social media. Things like monorails and people movers and virtual reality and 3D. I know that 3D is quite a common thing these days, kind of passe even. But when it first came out, the place where you saw this kind of these kind of films was at theme parks and amusement parks. So it's this really weird juxtaposition, and I kind of call it the Disneyland dilemma, because people love Disneyland for its nostalgia and its classic appeal. And there are so many opening day rides and attractions that still exist to this day. And God forbid if Disney wants to touch any one of those, the uproar would be crazy. At the same time, in order to remain relevant, Disney has to keep innovating and introducing new attractions and new lands and new things. Kind of difficult in a landlocked place like Disneyland, where you can't touch anything that dates back to the 1950s, but you want to introduce something new. They found some clever ways to get around that. But I just wanted to say that as we jump into these, that there's a reason why I think these parks have been around for so long, because they hold a special place not only in my heart, but I think in a lot of people's hearts. So with that, let's take a look at the oldest continuously operating parks in the United States. And the first one is Lake Compounce, which is in Bristol, Connecticut, in the central part of the state. It dates back to 1846. And when I say it dates back to 1846, I mean, if we could travel back in time and go to Lake Compounce back then, you wouldn't recognize it as an amusement park as we do today. It was really just what was known back then as a picnic park. It was a place where families would go, and the lake was there, so people could go swimming, and it's surrounded by mountains. It's a beautiful natural setting and provides a lot of, I think, shade perhaps in the summertime from that mountain. And but it did begin in 1846. It eventually evolved into an amusement park. At some point along the way, trolleys also brought people to the park, although it's not considered a trolley park because it was not originally built by a trolley company. So that kind of disqualifies it as a trolley park. But Lake Compounce is a wonderful park. One of the things that I note about it is that even though it is the oldest continuously operating park, has a tremendous history, it doesn't really dwell on its past much. If you go there, if you want to seek it out and try hard, you can find clues to its past. But it operates today as a contemporary amusement park, and families going today who may not know about its past would nonetheless have a wonderful time because of the contemporary thrills that it offers in rides such as Boulder Dash, a wonderful, wonderful wooden coaster, and other. They have a beautiful water park. One of the great things about the water park is, unlike perhaps any other park that I've ever seen, and you guys maybe can chime in. I don't know any other water park where the slides, some of the slides anyways, empty directly into the lake rather than emptying into a splash pool or something like that. So Lake Compounce is a wonderful park. I live in New England, so I get to go there every now and again, which is great. And that's Lake Compounce.
Awesome.
Do I just keep going down the line here? You guys going to ask me
Well,
questions?
no. I think we'll interject with some stuff. So Lake Compounds, you said that's
Sure.
the oldest park
Yes.
in the United States. So Boulder Dash obviously is a phenomenal ride, and it's extraordinarily old. What do you think attributes to that continuing to have the impact that it does on the industry and on enthusiasts, and like what do you think gives it the staying power that it has?
You talking about Boulder Dash
Boulder
itself?
Dash, yeah.
Yeah, it is just a fabulous wooden coaster. What's unique about it is that it's built into the side of the mountain. I believe it's called Southington Mountain, that borders one side of the park. The track never rises very high off of the ground. It just uses the natural terrain of the mountain. But what a heck of a natural terrain! I mean, it's a mountain, for crying out loud. And so it climbs way up into the mountain, turns around, drops down. It's basically an out and back coaster. And when it makes the return trip, you're kind of going along the lake. It's got beautiful views. It's one of these coasters. I don't know if either of you guys have been on it, but it's one of these rides that seems to magically and mysteriously just maintain its energy right up until you reach the unload station. It just tears. And it just provides a wonderful ride. So it's one of those. I think I was there for the opening day for this coaster, and it's maintained its integrity. Although I think I learned recently that we may be seeing some Titan track on that, which is kind of interesting. But that's my take on Boulder Dash. One of the greatest wooden coasters I've ever been on.
Yeah,
for
I've been
sure.
on it, and I agree 100% with you. It's one of the best ones that I've been on. And I'm a big fan of carousels too. And I think that when you're talking about these older parks, and these carousels are, decades old, to me that just adds a lot to the charm.
Yeah, and the carousel at Lake Compounce goes back to 1898. So that's a heck of an old carousel, and a beautiful one at that.
Awesome. All right, Arthur, what's the ninth oldest theme park in the United States, amusement park?
We're going to go to a park that both of you guys, I'm sure, are extremely familiar with, and that's Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. And some people may be surprised to learn that. Again, a lot of people probably go to Cedar Point and aren't really aware of its history, but it goes back to 1870. And I think similar to Lake Compounce, the appeal was to, get away from the city and go up to Lake Erie and get some lake breezes and jump in the water and cool off. And, back in 1870, again, like Lake Compounce, there weren't roller coasters and other mechanical rides there, but over time, of course, it's grown to be one of the country's, really one of the world's great amusement parks. 17 roller coasters, and I don't have to tell you or the people listening
Right.
to this podcast about Cedar Point, but it's of course a wonderful, wonderful place. And my goodness, do I love Steel Vengeance.
The thing about Cedar Point for me too, having kind of grown up with it being, in Ohio here, where I would, at least go up once a year starting in the 1980s, is how they put in all this modern hardware, but yet they've been able to maintain that old school charm.
Yeah, and I think that's a recurring theme throughout the list here. You're going to be able to, it may not be obvious at first glance, but if you do just a little digging, you'll be able to recognize some of the the remnants from its earlier days, but still enjoy it for its contemporary thrills and appeal today, without necessarily having to acknowledge its glorious past.
Yeah, it was. They celebrated their 150th anniversary a couple years ago, which they had a fantastic celebration and a great tribute to the past. But one thing that's kind of popped in my mind, and I actually meant to ask you this last time you were on the show, but it didn't really fit into the context, and I forgot. But so I was there with my girlfriend. She doesn't know or care about the history of any theme park, but she was like, "Oh, it's 150 years old," and it's like, "Well, it is." But the Cedar Point that you know is only a couple decades old. I mean, and so I was trying to debate with the modern Cedar Point that we know now. Do you think that it started with either Blue Streak or Magnum, or like if you were going to say that the modern era, the Cedar Point that we know now, started with a particular event, a ride installation, something like that? What do you think it would be?
Well, I don't know the name of the very first coaster at Cedar Point. I know that it's no longer operating, but maybe that might be where you could trace, in my mind, where you could trace the history. Once people got a taste of roller coasters, there was, I think, no going back, and um, and that's obvious at Cedar Point, because they've they've evolved into this park that's known for its 17 roller coasters. So I guess for me, I would say, whenever it was and whatever that very first roller coaster was, would, to me, kind of mark the point at which it became an amusement park, and kind of set the path for what it has become today.
Yeah, I believe it was Switchback Railway, and I'm going to look on rcdb.com,
That
which
sounds right.
is the Google of roller coasters. Let's look up Cedar Point, because I'm curious as to what the year that was. You do make a good point, but Switchback Railway was one of those. I believe it was like horses pulled the train up the hill, so it was incredibly far from a modern take on a roller coaster. Let's see here. Switchback Railway was 1892 is when it was built and closed in 1901. So you would say that the modern history of Cedar Point dates back all the way to 1892?
I would. I mean, sure, you could make an argument about Blue Streak or Magnum. Those are both, very consequential coasters, certainly. But I think once there was the introduction of mechanical rides, and especially roller coasters, it changed the whole character of the park and the whole reason for going. People still went, I'm sure, back in 1892 to enjoy the breezes and to have picnics and to maybe play sports and to jump in the water and cool down. But boy, they were going to ride that Switchback Railway, because that was quite a novelty, and they wanted to come back year after year to get back on that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. The other thought that I had was perhaps you could, I definitely want your take on this, but you could also say that the modern history of Cedar Point actually started with Gemini, because I think that was their first, like, world's tallest, longest, whatever, and they haven't
Hmm.
really stopped since then. But I guess it's all
Yeah,
subjective, isn't
yeah,
it?
sure. It is. It is. There's no right or wrong answer here, but that's my
What's your
take on
take,
it.
Don? When would you say the modern history of Cedar Point began?
Well, I mean, I agree with Arthur that you got to go back, you know, to the first roller coaster, that type of ride that they had back then. But I would think Gemini pretty much was when, they started to get more into the higher end thrill type rides there. There was a lot of, family attractions, but I think that kind of started them on that path, because then after that, you have the corkscrew came in, you have, then you got into with Magnum, that started the big thing of bringing in the record breakers and all those kind of things. But, I think you really got to trace it almost back to its roots, back in the late 1800s. And I think everything kind of evolves from there. So if you kind of take what Cedar Point is today, back in that era, the late 1800s, that would have been, the place to go for thrills.
Absolutely. All right. What are we on? Number 8. What's the eighth oldest theme park in the United States? Still operating,
It's
of course.
one of my hometown parks. It's Six Flags New England, which is in the western part of the state, in Agawam, Massachusetts, near Springfield, kind of near Connecticut as well. Um, And there were, as I say in my article, there were no Six Flags parks in the 1800s. Of course, there were no amusement parks really, for that matter. Not not in the way that we think of them today. Um, and again, it began as, in this case, it was a grove, and it was along the river that runs alongside Six Flags New England, and again, it was a place, I think, to escape the heat of Springfield and nearby cities, and maybe get into the shade of the forest there, and perhaps jump into the river and do some swimming. I'm not sure what it was like back then, but it eventually evolved into Riverside Amusement Park in 1912, and its first roller coaster was the Giant Dip. Six Flags came along many years later. That was in 2000. And today they've transformed the park to the point where it's virtually unrecognizable from its pre-Six Flags days. The Thunderbolt coaster, which dates back to the 1940s, remains. And it does have a wonderful old carousel from 1909 as well, but virtually everything else in the park is thrill rides and huge water park slides and all the kinds of things you'd expect to find at a Six Flags park. So there isn't too much to remind folks of the past there, but it is one heck of a wonderful park. We were talking about it a bit before we started the podcast today. Two of my favorite coasters in the whole world. Superman, which I think is to this day remains one of the best steel coasters, and Wicked Cyclone, which is the old Riverside Cyclone, is a wonderful RMC hybrid. So that is Six Flags New England.
Yeah, I loved the Riverside Cyclone before they did all the work on it and then transformed it into what it is today. But had a good time there. When I went in, the 1980s, and another one of those parks again that just, when you were walking around at that time, there were still some remnants of it being really old, and I just really enjoyed it. There weren't the at that time, Superman, that wasn't there, but it wasn't the biggest park I'd been to, but it kind of was a little bit of a throwback to me of Cincinnati's Coney Island without the water all around it.
Yeah. It was a little sad for me, living here as I do in Massachusetts. In its later days, in the 1990s, it really kind of went downhill. It was obviously having great difficulty maintaining it just had fallen into great disrepair, peeling paint and closed rides, and it was really hard to kind of go there. So I was grateful when Six Flags came along and invested a lot of capital in it and really turned it around. In a way, I'm sad that it's no longer Riverside and it's lost kind of its connection to the past. But I'm grateful that Six Flags came in and did what it did. So
yeah, definitely breathed new life into the park.
Right, absolutely.
Cool.
All right, what's next?
So next, we have a small park in Pennsylvania. I haven't been to all of the parks on the list here, and this is one of the ones that I've not been to, although I do hope to get there someday. This is Idlewild, which is run by the Kennywood folks, which also obviously is in Pennsylvania. This one dates back to 1878, and I think perhaps maybe, I'm not quite sure about this, but perhaps maybe more than any of the other parks on the list, this is a park that kind of embraces its past, and it's loaded with classic rides that date back decades, including the Rollo coaster. That's ROLLO, which is this kiddie coaster that opened in 1938 and is still delighting passengers today. And its merry-go-round dates back to 1931, and it has a 1939 whip that is still delighting folks. I think Pennsylvania may have more whips than any other state.
Yeah.
There are quite a few of them. You can't find too many whips these days, but there's at least 3 that I know of in Pennsylvania, perhaps more. One of the cool things about Idlewild, for many years it had a Mr. Rogers neighborhood, and it now has a Daniel Tigers neighborhood, which is kind of a spinoff from Mr. Rogers. So little. I should say too, it's designed for little kids. It's a park that is built for families with young children. So all of these rides, the roller coaster and all of the other ones, are designed for little kids to enjoy.
Yeah, I had planned to go there about 15 years ago, but it was not open that week that I was in that area of Pennsylvania, so it was kind of a disappointment there. But
Road
definitely,
trip. We'll have to do a road trip,
yeah,
Don.
definitely on my bucket list to go there.
I've never been there. I've always heard good things. I love old parks, so that's all I have to add because I've never been there.
Me too. Me too. And another old park that I haven't been to, although I've had some lovely conversations with the family that owns and operates it, is Seabreeze in Rochester, New York, which is the next park on our list. And that one dates back to 1879. And it is a trolley park. And for folks who don't know, a trolley park is a park that was originally built by the trolley company, the trolley company that during the week would provide transportation for folks to go to work. But on the weekend, they found that there were very few passengers riding their trolley lines. And they discovered that if they built an amusement park at the end of the trolley line, then folks would ride their trolleys and go to the amusement park, and they were therefore kind of double dipping and making money both from the trolleys and from the amusement park that they built. So Seabreeze, I don't know exactly where it's located, but I'm guessing it's on the outskirts of Rochester at the very end of what used to be the trolley line. And this is a very small park, and as I said, it's still owned and operated, family owned and operated, which there are very few parks that can make that claim these days. And among its coasters is the Jackrabbit, which dates back to 1920, which makes it one of the oldest continuously operating roller coasters in the country. It also has a junior coaster called the Bobsleds that opened in 1952. And interestingly, it opened with a wooden track, was converted to a steel track coaster in 1968. So there's a little bit of trivia for you folks about Seabreeze in Rochester, New York.
I've been there once. It was 42 years ago, and what I remember
Oh
most,
boy.
what I remember most about it was the cotton candy and also the saltwater taffy. Those are that's the two things that came to mind. As soon as you mentioned that park, was it brought back memories of that. The Jackrabbit, remember that as well. But the rest of it, it's a little bit fuzzy for me. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Very small little park, but definitely something to put on your bucket list and check out if you're in the Rochester, New York area.
Well, Don, considering the vintage of some of these rides, like the Jackrabbit going back to 1920, I would imagine not a heck of a lot has changed since the 40 years ago when you last
Probably
visited.
not. Probably not. But but it was just it was one of those things. It wasn't a lot of time spent in the park because there wasn't a lot to do. But I just remember the cotton candy, a ride on the Jackrabbit, and also the saltwater taffy. It's just what I remembered about it. And then when I had some friends that I had met from that area when they were coming down to visit me at Kings Island, I asked them to bring me some of that saltwater taffy, and so I would get that every now and then, every couple of years when they'd come to visit.
Well, and this is part of the appeal of these parks that you can return 40 years later and find it largely unchanged, and
Yeah.
there's something that I find just really wonderful about that. We may have AI and virtual reality and divisiveness in the political divisiveness in the country, and all these things that might drive us crazy. But there's a refuge in places like Seabreeze that we can take a ride on a roller coaster that dates back to 1920, and I think that's great.
Hey, Arthur, I've been sitting on this question for about 2 months for you because I almost
Okay.
emailed you or tweeted you with this, but I
All right.
decided to keep it for the show and you
Uh-oh.
just reminded me. So,
Okay.
Jackrabbit, Big Dipper, Little Dipper, how come all these coasters from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s all had similar names?
I can't answer that, Ryan. I'm sure that there are historians out there who could, and maybe that might make an interesting column. Actually, maybe I should write
Feel
about it.
free.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I would imagine partly there were only a handful of folks designing these coasters. If you study the history of them, you'll see the same names over and over building them, and maybe they just kind of recycled the names partly, or maybe they were inspired by successful coasters that had that name in other parts of the country, and when they wanted to build theirs, maybe they copied it. But I'm only speculating. I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, I mean, my only thought is, I mean, if we had this conversation 40 or 50 years from now, they'd be like, why are so many rides named Wild Mouse? So maybe that was just like a Jackrabbit was that type of ride, and it wasn't written, but it was understood.
Yeah.
You ever thought about that?
Could be, could be. Yeah.
I don't know. What's the next oldest coaster? Or next oldest park, sorry.
Well, the next oldest park, right? We're going to stay in New York, and we're going to go to Sylvan Beach Amusement Park, which dates back to the 1870s. It's a little unclear exactly what year it began. This is even smaller than Seabreeze, I believe. It's another park I have not been to. It's located on a lake, and it has kind of like Seabreeze has some vintage rides that remain there, including a rare Rocco plane. I'm not sure if you guys know what a Rocco
Oh yeah,
plane is,
we
but
used to have one
kind of
here.
looks like, yeah, okay. So it kind of looks like a Ferris wheel that's about to topple over.
Yeah.
And instead of seats that swivel like a traditional Ferris wheel, they rock around, and they have these egg-shaped kind of cages that sort of rock around. And it looks delightfully old, and there are very few of them left, but Sylvan Beach has one of them. Also has a rotor, which folks who are familiar with a rotor, and it has one of my favorite flat rides. I don't know if you guys are familiar with a Tip Top or a Bubble
Yep.
Bounce, but I used to
Yeah.
love these when I was a little kid, and there were very, very few of them left, and that alone is worth a trip to Sylvan Beach, I think. So I've got to get out there someday.
And for me, it'd be worth going out to try the rotor again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don, I think we have a road trip coming up. We've got to go to Sylvan
We
Beach,
do.
And I'll just be
yeah,
here
and
doing the podcast alone, I guess.
Idlewild.
Now, so a tip
No,
top, just
Ryan,
to clarify, I know of a ride.
you're welcome to come along, Ryan.
We'll,
Yeah,
we'll call
that's
in
a
from the
pity
parks.
invite. I'm not doing that. But like, so a tip top, just to clarify, I want to make sure I have the right ride. So that's people load into tubs in a platform that they can free spin, and then it pops up in the air.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Then I have ridden that. Those things, I can handle them. I bet 60% of people can't, at least the way I drive them.
Well, yeah, if you're spinning that wheel, yeah, you're going to be pretty disoriented.
Yeah.
It's funny you bring that up. We may have talked about this before, Ryan. I can't remember, but I am no spring chicken. I've been doing this for a long, long time. I used to say I'm well into the throes of middle age, but I don't even know if I can claim that anymore. And yet, I am still able to go on spinning rides, which many of my contemporaries are not able to do. I've been blessed with a cast iron stomach, which is great considering the profession that I have. So it's been many years since I've been on a tip top, and I'm pretty sure I could still handle it. And I hope to try it one of these days.
I consider that a challenge. The next time you're in Cincinnati, we've got a little privately owned amusement park that's about 3 square acres called Stricker's Grove. They have a tip top.
Uh-huh.
We're going to have the Arthur Levine challenge.
Just make sure you have a bucket nearby.
You ride in a bucket, you're fine.
Okay.
Okay. The next oldest park.
I'm cheating a little bit on this next one because it's not really a park. This is Coney Island, and the original Coney Island, not the one you guys have in Ohio.
Right.
This is Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York, which dates back to 1884, and it's not really a park. It's really a collection of parks, although these days it's kind of 2 amusement parks, Luna Park and Dino's Wonder Wheel Park. And then there are a handful of other independent contractors that run some attractions there as well, which they have for years. The reason that I included it is, even though it doesn't meet the definition of a park, it's so important to the history of the industry that it seemed to me it was critical that I include Coney Island on this list, and so that's why I have. And of course, folks I think are quite familiar with Coney Island. it's got the 1927 Cyclone, the original wooden roller coaster that kind of turned into itself and was so popular, is so popular, I should say, that it's generically coasters that do that are known as Cyclone coasters these days, and many coasters have copied that name. Ryan,
I was
those
going to bring that up.
Right, right. But that's the original, and of course the Wonder Wheel. And I know you guys had Dino on a couple of weeks ago, and I've got to say, Dino Vorderis is, as you discovered, I'm not sure if you knew him before he appeared with you guys, is one heck of a nice guy. Really, one of the nicest people in the industry, for that matter. One of the nicest people I've ever met, and I'm proud to say that he is a friend of mine as well, and just a great guy. Again, Dino's Wonder Wheel Park, one of the few remaining family owned and operated parks. And Dino's such a good friend that he helped me fulfill a dream a few years ago. A couple of years ago, they opened the new Phoenix coaster that you guys were talking about, the suspended coaster, and he allowed me to operate the coaster. I've always wanted to operate a coaster, and he gave me that opportunity, and I was able to write about it and have a video of me operating the coaster, and that was a thrill of a lifetime. So shout out to Dino and his family, who are all wonderful, and let's hear it for Coney Island. It's nothing like it was in its heyday, and man, oh man, what a heyday it had. But it's on the rebound, and that's really wonderful to see. There's all kinds of new activity there and new life, and they've added so many new attractions that I think they've sort of reached the capacity of the defined amusement area. If they're going to continue expanding, they're going to have to expand that amusement area, which I hope they do, and really kind of regain some of its glory, because Coney Island to me is just gives me such joy. I just love going there, and it's doing what it's always done, and that is providing a place for people of all cultures and all walks of life to come together and have fun, and escape the city for a little while, and have just great fun at Coney Island. So what a great place.
It is. That's my introduction to Nathan's Hot Dogs.
You can't talk about Coney Island without talking about Nathan's Hot Dogs.
No.
Yeah, actually, you said a couple weeks ago, but our interview with Dino was today is Monday. We did it last Wednesday, so it was just a couple days ago. We had him on the show, and I knew about Coney Island, but I didn't know much about it. So Don knew Dino going into it, and I can attest, what a nice guy. We did about an hour with him on the show, and he had fantastic insights and just a fascinating story. But we still talked to him for probably another 45 minutes after we were done recording, because he was talking about living in New York, and because we were joking around about that. We made a joke about how if we go to Dino's Wonder Wheel, since there's no parking, we're just going to park at his house and and take the monorail there or something like that. But yeah, so previous episode 36, Dino from Dino's Wonder Wheel. Couldn't recommend it more.
I completely agree with you. I loved listening to you guys talking with Dino. He's, as I said, just one of the nicest guys in the industry.
Absolutely. Next up.
So for next up, we go back to Pennsylvania and go to Dorney Park, which dates back to 1884. And this is kind of similar to many of the other parks that we've been talking about. Folks who go to Dorney Park today know it as a Cedar Fair park, and it has contemporary thrills, but it does date back to 1884, where I guess it began. It had a zoo, and refreshment stands and a hotel, and it eventually evolved into a trolley park. And added things like roller coasters and some of the more contemporary rides. So a similar story to many of the parks that we're talking about today. Dorney Park's a major park in Pennsylvania. And again, if you're not kind of looking for it, you may not be aware of its history, but it does date back to 1884.
I did not know it was that old.
Yeah, and we've been kind of focusing on sort of the eastern part of the country, but the next park we go all the way out to Utah, where in 1886 the Park Lagoon first opened, and this is very high up on my bucket list. This is a park, another park I have not been to. But I really want to get out there because they've been doing some crazy things lately there at that park, and they've got Primordial coming this year, which they haven't really released exactly what it's going to be, but it looks very intriguing. But what a history! When you go back to its very earliest days, its very first carousel predates the engine, the steam engine, which made mechanical carousels possible in later years. So in its very earliest days, it was mules that provided the power for its very first carousel. And this is something I can relate to because I live in Massachusetts and live near Salem, Massachusetts, which folks may know as the Witch City. But there's a wonderful place called Salem Willows there, which I'm going to be doing some research because I think it should probably be listed as a trolley park. It's a very small, tiny park, but it too had a carousel that was mule powered. And the carousel building is still there to this day. You can see the conical form and of the roof, and I've talked to the folks that own the building, and they confirm that that's where the carousel was, and so it's just amazing to me the history of the industry, and a place like Lagoon having these carousels that mules first provided the power for. But Lagoon these days has some wonderful coasters and other attractions, but it dates back to 1886, so it's the ninth oldest park on my list here. And I have to say, this list isn't necessarily definitive. There are other parks that would kind of you could fit in between, but these are parks that we would recognize today as amusement parks. There are some parks that maybe at one time had a coaster or a carousel, and was an amusement park at one point, and maybe today just is a place where you can go and get a slice of pizza or something. And so technically it's kind of still there, but so I kind of made some judgment calls when I put this list together. So I don't want anybody to think that this is some kind of definitive list. This is just kind of a list that I threw together based on some principles that I that I came up with.
Yeah, I think loosely we can say that, for whatever era it was in, it was considered what we consider to be an amusement park. So if it was beachfront with a roller rink, that sort of stuff in the 1800s, or the one roller coaster, and now they got steel coasters, that sort of stuff. That's what it sort of sounds like. Where, I mean, because we've got, for example, Swordsville Lake near us, which is still a park now, but it's a public park, and they have remnants of the park intentionally there, the old sky ride and stuff that you can't ride or anything. But that obviously wouldn't count. But as theme parks, as we know them evolve, that's how you can judge the age. At least that's the way I'm interpreting what you're giving us.
Yeah.
Awesome. What's next?
So the final list on the final park, I should say, on my list is Arnold's Park, which is in Arnold's Park, Iowa. Dates back to 1889. And one of the things that makes this park unique is that it is a free admission amusement park. There aren't too many of those left these days. Visitors pay per ride, just as they have been doing for decades. And in 1930, the wooden coaster that opened as the Giant Dips is now known as the Legend, and it's still providing thrills for folks on its figure eight course. So it's a small park, and it's as I said, one of its distinctions is the fact that it's free admission, which a lot of folks may not know exactly what that is, because the pay one price, where you pay one price to get in at the front gate, and then you can ride as many rides as you want or are able to get on, I guess is maybe the better way to put it. It is a relatively modern convention, probably dates back to the 80s, I think. But prior to that, all parks either were free admission or they charged a modest admission, and then you paid per ride by buying tickets, as you might do at a carnival or a state fair these days. So that's Arnold's Park, and that's my list of the top 10 continuously operating oldest amusement parks in the country.
And those listening, that's the kind of content you're going to get when you read Arthur at his Substack. And again, Arthur, you want to go ahead and give out that URL again?
Sure, it's About Theme Parks. That's ABOUT themeparks.fun.fun. And folks can go there and they can sign up to receive my newsletter. There is a free option where people can, they don't have to pay to receive my newsletter. And then twice a week, they'll, in their email inbox, they'll get my articles. Or there are some paid options. You can become a paid subscriber and get some of my bonus content, which includes things like my Rode It, Loved It ride reviews. These are rides or attractions that I've been on in the past and absolutely love them, and provide a review of them. And that's content that only paid subscribers can get. That's one of the things. So love to have you join me, and this is something I've been doing for just about a year now. This is kind of a new thing for me. I used to write for USA Today and for other magazines and newspapers and for online providers, and now I'm trying something different that a lot of journalists are doing, and providing this direct to subscriber using this direct to subscriber model. So rather than trying to go out and compete for eyeballs and compete for folks using search engine optimization, I'm inviting people, like-minded people who love amusement parks, love theme parks, love roller coasters, love attractions, to join me in this adventure, and we can kind of form this little community and have some fun. And I'm so glad that you guys are subscribers. It's great to have you on board, and great to be able to come here and talk about it.
Yeah, if you're interested in the industry, again, I highly recommend that you subscribe. Just some great content. And another article that you recently published is "The Secret Life of Pets is Off the Leash at Universal Studios Hollywood." What are your thoughts on Universal going to the dogs?
Well, the real big news at Universal Hollywood, of course, is the Super Nintendo World, which I also wrote about. But I hadn't been back to the park since before they opened Secret Life of Pets. So when I was there recently for the opening of Super Nintendo World, I also got to experience that ride, and it's great. I just thought it was so wonderful, very cute. For folks who are familiar with the terminology, I kind of refer to it as a plus C-ticket ride, and by that I mean Disneyland and Disney World, when they for many years when they first opened, had their ticket books, and we were just talking about how there was no such thing as a pay one price model, and that included Disneyland and Disney World, and they had different categories of rides, starting with A tickets and going all the way up to E tickets for the very best rides. Those are the ones that cost the most. And the C ticket rides were the classic dark rides, like the Snow White ride and the Mr. Toad ride and Pinocchio ride. So these classic dark rides, the Alice in Wonderland ride is another one at Disneyland. These classic rides, classic dark rides, that's what this reminded me of, except just kind of using today's technology and incorporating all the latest, greatest theme park tricks. So obviously based on the Secret Life of Pets movie, featuring those characters, I thought that the queue was almost as appealing as the ride itself. It was very, very cute, where you make your way through the apartment building where the dogs live before you get on the ride. And then once you're on the ride, what the convention here is that you yourself have been turned into a puppy, and you're looking for your forever home because you don't have an owner. And so that's sort of the story of the ride, that the characters are helping to groom you and place you in front of prospective owners so that you can find your forever home. I thought it was incredibly cute, very endearing, very appealing, and would highly recommend it. And I know that Universal has kind of developed this reputation for having attractions with lots of screens, and there's been some criticism about that. In my estimation, maybe folks are a little bit too heavy-handed with their criticism sometimes about Universal and its reliance on screens. Nevertheless, The Secret Life of Pets proves, with all of the wonderful animatronics in there, that they're quite capable of delivering a classic ride with animatronics and practical sets, and kind of doing it the old-fashioned way, but using the latest, greatest technology to make it very contemporary and very appealing.
Hey Arthur, I've got a question for you. So
Yes,
you
Ryan.
mentioned in your description, you said that the queue is almost as good or maybe better than the ride. I kind of want you to expand
Hmm.
on that, because a perfect example of something like that is the Jimmy Fallon ride um, at Universal Orlando. Because
Hmm.
my feedback that I got before I actually experienced the ride was that the queue's really good, but the ride is, and I think that's a fair assessment, but I think the sum of all parts is fantastic because the queue is that good. It's a great experience. Do you think that there's substance to that, as in maybe the ride can just be the tail end of the experience while the queue is the heart of the experience? Like, what are your thoughts on that with your experience in modern rides?
Well, I do think that it should be taken as a whole. As you said, kind of the sum of its parts. The the art of building attractions has definitely evolved, and I think that much more attention is being paid to the pre-show, to the queue experience. And The Secret Life of Pets is a great example of that. Um, it's a, as I also say in my article, it is a very slow loading and slow moving queue. So you're in line for quite a while. And thankfully, the experience of being in that queue is made much better because there are actually animatronics and set pieces, and these wonderfully themed rooms that you walk through on your way to get onto the ride. And so I would definitely agree with you, Ryan, that I am seeing this trend where the queue. Another great example is at Super Nintendo World, the Mario Kart ride also has an incredible queue, a very long one as well. And there are many other examples of highly themed, very immersive cues, and I think it's a great I think it's a great trend that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think that we could. I'm not going to dive into Super Nintendo World because we've talked about it on the show quite a bit, and I feel like we could have you on for a whole show dedicated to that and the impact that it could have. But one thing that I've noticed about, especially Super Nintendo World, and I'm sure other people had it with Harry Potter, although personally I've never really been into Harry Potter because I was too old when it came out. But Super Nintendo, and Nintendo in general, is something that I grew up with. So it's like for my whole life I've wanted to visit the Mushroom Kingdom. I can go there now in California. I think that's a really cool. What a time to be alive, right?
I agree. I
Yep,
agree. It's a great time to be covering the industry. So, the three of us
that's for sure.
are where we need to be, I think.
We need to do a podcast live from the ride. I've always wanted to do that. All right.
Coming soon.
Awesome. Okay. So, Arthur, in another article, you rated Lightning Rod at Dollywood 4.75 out of 5. Um,
Hmm.
just to disclose bias, Lightning Rod's one of my favorite rides. How did you come to that
Hmm.
conclusion of 4.75 out of 5? What do you rate on it? And for you, what would, let's just use lightning rod as an example, but how would you make that a perfect 5?
Well, first of all, I have to say that there aren't. I'm not particularly generous with my really high ratings. I try to maintain the integrity of my reviews and my rating system by, being kind of judicious about who gets which coasters and which rides get the really high ratings. And I definitely agree with you, Ryan, that Lightning Rod, in my estimation, is one of the world's greatest coasters, certainly one of the greatest coasters that I've ever been on, and therefore it rates the 4.75. As to what leads me to give it that kind of a rating, a lot of it's subjective. It's just kind of my experience, but the kinds of things that I look at are things like the ride experience itself. Is it smooth? Is it rough? What's the thrill factor like? What's the airtime like? What's the layout like? How does the coaster integrate with the park and its environment? Is there any novelty to it? What makes it different from all other rides out there? And as you guys know, Lightning Rod, well, at the time that it debuted anyways, it was the world's first launched wooden coaster. It no longer is, it's sort of a Franken coaster now. It's not really a wooden coaster. And it really wasn't a traditional wooden coaster when it opened either. But mostly I would say is, kind of, does it achieve what it set out to do? And by that, I mean, it really wouldn't be fair to compare, let's say, the Coney Island Cyclone, which is a wonderful ride to this day. If you didn't know anything about that ride and didn't know that it opened in 1927 and its incredible history, or the history of Coney Island for that matter, and you rode it today, you would say, this is a great ride, even though it's so old. But would it be fair to compare the Coney Island Cyclone to, say, Lightning Rod, or maybe to Mako at SeaWorld? Orlando might be another example. I don't think so, and I wouldn't necessarily rate it on the same system, because I wouldn't use the same the same rating qualifications for something like that. So I look, does it achieve what it set out to do? And in the case of Lightning Rod, you've got this launched wooden coaster, set it into the mountainside. Does it achieve what it set out to do? Oh my goodness, yes.
Boy, does it, doesn't
ever.
it?
Oh my gosh, the airtime, that quadruple down. I mean, and you're just way off on the mountainside there, way off in the woods. You can't even really see what's going on from the midway. It's a fabulous, fabulous ride, and I defy anybody to get off it and say, holy moly, what just happened to me? That was incredible. And to me, I was grinning ear to ear and knew right away it was going to get a high ranking, and I kind of settled on 4.75. So there you go.
Yeah, and it's a ride that would only work in a setting like Dollywood, because the fact that, I mean, the quad down, best element on any coaster, I think. I think that's the most exciting 10 or so seconds of any ride I've ever been on, except for maybe like Top Thrill Dragster, King of the Ka launch kind of stuff. But coming down the mountain, if that were built just on steel, who cares? It'd be a good ride. But the fact that it comes down the mountain makes it so unique that I think that it really kind of kicks it over the line. I think it's just a great ride.
Yeah, and that launch, I mean, there are plenty of launch coasters and more and more every year. But that launch going uphill, up to that cupola and going off into the mountain, oh my goodness, it just takes your breath away, and just loved it from start to finish. I was out there for the grand opening of Lightning Rod, and Dolly Parton herself was there, and she performed a song from the 1950s, I think, or maybe the 1960s, that she recorded way back when. And unfortunately, Lightning Rod was not ready to open, so they had this big grand opening, and Dolly was there, and everything was in place except the coaster was not ready to be opened. And it took me a while to get back and actually get on there, and it was well worth the wait.
Boy, was it.
Yeah, what I like about Lightning Rod is it's really two different experiences if you do it during the day. and then you come back and do it again at night.
Yes,
So I think
yes, yes.
that's another thing for me that is important is this ride experience change dramatically between day and night, and on that one it does.
Hmm.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Don. Yeah, I mentioned that in my article. It is like a completely different animal at night. Yes, I agree, and wonderful,
Yeah,
absolutely
Wild
wonderful.
Eagle, I notice is a very different night ride too. I never would have thought it, but I happened to be there after dark during the Christmas time because they're not always open after dark, and it was very thrilling at night. It's just to throw that out there. All right.
All right, moving on. The micro parks have become a macro trend. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, this is something we're seeing more and more. Just recently, what I was writing about is that the Merlin folks, the folks who operate the Legoland parks and other parks, excuse me, are have announced that they're going to be opening the second Peppa Pig theme park here in the States in Texas. And coincidentally, it's being built near Dallas in a area in Texas where Universal recently announced that they're building a park as well. Both of which will be what I and others in the industry are referring to as a micro park. And what that means is, rather than a full day experience like you would get at Kings Island or at Disneyland, where you pretty much have to set aside the whole day if you really want to, or perhaps even 2 days if you want to get the full experience of most of these parks. A micro park is meant to be experienced over the course of hours and not a day, maybe 2, 3, 4 hours. And more often than not, they are geared to families with young children, in some cases, very young children, like Peppa Pig theme park, which is for preschoolers. And they don't really have the attention span to, last an entire day at Disneyland, to go early in the morning and be there at rope drop, and then to see the fireworks at the end of the day. They will have collapsed long before then. So we're seeing more and more of these. And in addition to the Peppa Pig theme park, one of which is adjacent to Legoland, Florida, and this new one that they're building in Texas, in Universal's park that they announced. There's also a park known as Kathmandu, which I believe just opened in Punta Cana, and I'm going to be going there in a few weeks to check it out. This is another micro park, and this one's quite interesting in the sense that it's only has 4 major attractions, but those 4 attractions are on sort of the e-ticket Disney Universal level. These are real sophisticated high-end attractions, one of which is uses a roving motion base vehicle, kind of like the Spider-Man ride at Universal Orlando. So we're talking about some very sophisticated, very costly, high-end attractions. But there's only 4 of them. And so for people who are on vacation in Punta Cana and maybe spending a day at the beach, and they want to take their family, maybe after they've been sunning themselves on the beach, and they want to go for a few hours to this small park, well, there it is. Another one that is being built and it has been delayed a bit is the Mattel Adventure Park, which is coming to Arizona. Also another micro park meant to be experienced, over the course of maybe 4 or 5 hours, geared to very young kids, featuring themes such as Barbie and Rock'em Sock'em Robots, I think, and Thomas the Tank Engine, and other toys and properties that fall under the Mattel umbrella. So this is something that we're seeing more and more, and I think it's great because not everybody wants to spend an entire day, and not everybody perhaps has the financial resources to go to a destination park like the Disney and Universal parks, but maybe want to experience, this level of a park without having to commit the time and maybe less money. So I think it's a great trend, and I'm anxious to see what else we might see. I have a feeling that Universal is maybe kind of testing the waters, and if this park goes well in Texas, there may be a Universal park coming to your neck of the woods. wherever you may be.
Thought you were talking to us specifically. Yeah, I mean, you probably saw.
I'm talking to you guys, and I'm talking to everybody
Everybody.
listening to
You
the
Yeah.
understood.
listening and watching.
Yeah, I saw the Hot Wheels train for the Hot Wheels coaster at IAPA.
Right,
Didn't that look great?
right. Yes, absolutely. I think there's going to be two Hot Wheels themed coasters there, I believe. Yeah, it's been a bit delayed. It was supposed to open actually, I think, late last year, and then they were saying this year, and now it looks like it's going to be 2024.
Oh,
And it's exciting too for the folks who live in Arizona because there is no major amusement park theme park in Arizona, at least not to my knowledge. So it'll be great to have that there for them.
yeah. I'm looking at an article. I actually did not know that it was getting delayed. So that's news to me. But let me pull this up really quickly. And it's saying 2024. It's got to be supply chain. I mean, it really does have to be because just imagine how easily it would be to get hung up, and it could push you back a year pretty easily.
Yeah, it could be supply chain. It could be, financing. It could be permitting. I'm not really sure what the reasons are, but whatever the reasons, it's been delayed. However, I don't know exactly what you're looking at, Ryan, but I think they have a construction cam on their website. They're definitely building it. It's coming. It will be built, just delayed, and should be exciting when they do build it.
Yeah, I'm looking at NBC4 out of California. I just happened to be the article that I pulled up, and it actually linked to the
Mhm.
construction cam. And yeah, there's. I mean, I'm just looking at it now, and they're definitely clearing. You can definitely see formations and stuff. Like there's stuff there.
Yeah, and like many of these parks, like Kathmandu and Punta Cana, and some of the other parks, Universal as well in Texas. This one in Arizona will be a resort. There's going to be a hotel component and I think a dining entertainment complex. So it won't just be the park; it'll be kind of a self-contained resort as well. And the park will be the main draw, or one of the main draws, anyways.
Perfect. All right. So let's move along to a park that is very much open right now. So Disney's California Adventure. And I am not good at saying this word. I just learned the word charcuterie board the other day. I think we might have discussed that on the show. But San Francisco, is that close enough? Did you guys?
I think you got it, Ryan.
Okay,
I
San
think
Francisco.
you
It took
nailed
me
it.
all week to practice that. So they're adding San Francisco. See, now I'm already messing it up. But they're adding that to California's Disney's California Adventure. Do you think that they are in the process of taking the California out of California Adventure? And do you think that it was reasonable to have a theme park themed to California in California? I always thought that was a weird juxtaposition.
I think the original intention of Disney when they built Disney California Adventure was to try to appeal to tourists, to people visiting the area who may not have the time to spend going up and down the coast. California is quite a big state, and going all the way from Northern California down to Southern California to see everything that it has to offer, the mountains and the ocean and Hollywood and everything else that it has to offer, would be difficult. So I think Disney's thought was, let's try to provide, the theme park version of what a California trip might be, so that in an easily digestible format, folks can get a sense of what California is all about. That was the original intention. Now, whether that was misguided or not, I'm not really sure. What I can say, though, is that it certainly was underfunded, and Disney itself, I think, has pretty much readily admitted this, that it especially sitting next to the crown jewel that is Disneyland, kind of paled in comparison. Even though it was built as a full day park, and I think when it first opened, you had to pay the same admission to get into Disney California Adventure as Disneyland. It never really, never really lived up to the model that is Disneyland at first. Since then, they have invested many hundreds of millions of dollars, and it is, I think, on par with Disneyland now. In the process, they've kind of geared away from the California aspect of the park. Things like Paradise Pier, which was Disney's version of California's many seaside amusement parks, is now Pixar Pier. So it's got the intellectual property kind of driving it, as many of the things that Disney do. Soaring over California, the wonderful ride is now soaring. I think it's called Soaring Around the World. So instead of just focusing on California, you kind of go around the world. The Hollywood Tower Hotel, that where the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror was, is now the Guardians of the Galaxy ride. So slowly but surely, they're kind of removing that original California theme and replacing it with mostly with intellectual property, including, in this case, Pacific Wharf, which was this small area devoted to Northern California culture and the locale up there, is now becoming San Francisco. Still has a tie to San Francisco, but with a Big Hero 6 overlay. So again, kind of getting away from that exclusive California focus and making it more of including its intellectual properties, in this case, Big Hero 6.
Absolutely.
All right. Another article that you recently published is about augmented reality, or AR. It holds a promise as a means of storytelling at park. Augmented reality, or AR, it holds a promise as a means of storytelling at parks. You recently wrote about this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've been really looking forward to seeing what park designers could do, attraction designers could do with augmented reality, because I think the experiment with virtual reality has not been I don't know that the experience has really worked. I know, you guys go to IAPA as I do, and we still see virtual reality all over the expo show floor. But I don't know that it's really made that it's had the impact that I think folks maybe originally had hoped for. And I believe the reason why is because there's an inherent flaw with virtual reality. And that flaw is that by putting on the goggles, the virtual reality goggles, you are totally disconnected and isolated from the friends and family that you came with, from the park. It's really just this isolating individual experience. You may as well be at home. There's really no reason for you to be at the amusement park, even though you may be on a roller coaster and feeling these sensations. The visuals that you're seeing, you're just disconnected from your surroundings. What's great about augmented reality is that it can provide all of this wonderful digital media, but you're not cut off at all from your friends and family who you came to the park with. You're not cut off from the park. You're not cut off from the attraction itself. You can experience it as you would a normal attraction, but it's augmented, hence the name, by these, this digital media. So the first major attraction, at least the first major one that I'm aware of, first major one at a major park, is Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge at Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios Hollywood, and I was delighted with it. I thought it was great, and I think that it shows the promise of augmented reality. I thought that, especially for being, a relatively new technology, at least in the attraction space, I thought Universal killed it. That you're able to go on this dock ride, and you've got all of the traditional dock ride elements of lighting and fog and sensory effects and media actually that's projected on screens, animatronics, set pieces, all the things that you'd want in a high-end dock ride. But in addition, you've got these visors on, and you've got this digital media that's projected onto it. In this case, the characters from Mario, and it was great. I just thought it was great, and can't wait to see what else Universal and other attraction designers come up with when it comes to augmented reality. So I think it holds great promise.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Absolutely. Well, Arthur, we almost every show we do a segment. I don't think we did it the last time we were on since we were flying this one solo, but we talk about 6 interesting articles or news pieces. So this is right up your alley. That in the theme park industry from the past week or the past month. You want to stick around and
Hmm.
discuss some theme park news with us?
Sure, let's do it.
Awesome. All right, so this is a segment that we like to do that we talk about some of our favorite articles from the past week or the last month, and we call it the Pick Six. Don, kick us off.
All right, engaging robots could be roaming Disney parks in the near future. Theme park analyst Dennis Spiegel, he said he expects the dynamic robot technology will be roaming among the guests at Disney parks within the next 5 years. What are your thoughts on that?
I can take this if that's okay.
Yeah.
With all props to Dennis, these dynamic robots have been in the parks for some time now, going back actually quite a few years. There was Lucky the dinosaur, who was not at Disney's Animal Kingdom for very long, but he was this roaming dinosaur. Most of the animatronics, which really Disney pioneered, up to the point of Lucky the dinosaur, were tethered to the ground. If you wanted to see an animatronic, you had to go to a theater or to ride an attraction. And the animatronics, the robots, were tethered to the ground and couldn't move. But Lucky the dinosaur was mobile. He was actually able to roam around the park and interact with guests. After that, there were Muppets, I think, at Disney's Hollywood Studios that roamed the park. So we've seen these before. What's different is these dynamic robots were were debuted at South by Southwest that Josh D'Amaro showed just I think about a week ago or 2 weeks ago. These are very sophisticated, sort of next level iterations of robots, and I think in addition to, in this case, this robot could stand up and start roller skating, which is kind of wild. But I think it may even maybe at some point incorporate things like being able to interact with guests and track eye movement and understand your language using artificial intelligence and maybe respond to you. So this is really the next level. And I do agree with Dennis that we're going to be seeing more and more of these in the parks, in attractions, and it's an exciting development.
Would you say that this is a positive thing or a negative thing? Because it seems like when we added like virtual reality to rides, it was something that was really exciting, and it was like the possibilities are endless. But as you kind of stated, there was something that was taken away that was pretty big. Do you think that there's anything to be taken away when they're doing animatronics instead of humans in costumes?
I don't know that it's necessarily going to replace humans in costumes. I think it will supplement them. At least that's my take on it. I mean, who knows what will really happen once Disney does in fact introduce these types of characters into the parks. But I would anticipate that it would supplement and not replace characters, especially the face characters like Cinderella and some of the other characters that you want to interact with humans. You don't want to just be interacting with robots. And so I think Disney is all about providing an escape from reality and making you feel, making you feel uh, optimistic about the future and reassured about your place in the world. And the last thing I think it wants to do is displace humans and insert us into this dystopian nightmare. So I think they have to be careful about how they introduce this, but I think that they will, because they're pretty smart about what they
The
do.
way that I kind of envision it, and this is probably the direction they're going to go, is not only now can you meet a stormtrooper and Chewbacca, but you can meet a life-size Grogu, like the little baby
Hmm.
Yoda thing,
Yeah,
and that would be an
yeah,
animatronic,
yep.
which I think would be cool. I mean, I'm on board.
I'm on board too. I'm on board too. I would not be on board if what you say would come to pass, in that all of a sudden, instead of meeting Mickey Mouse and Goofy at the park, we meet the robot version of them. That doesn't sound too cool to me.
No, that
Not,
would
I'm
not
not
be
into that.
fun.
Yeah.
No.
All right. Well, let's go on to story number 2. That takes us over to Orlando, and it looks like Universal has already announced the dates for Halloween Horror Nights for 2023. And tickets are already on sale. So the event, I just pulled this up. I believe it's September 1st through October 31st of 2023. Arthur, have you been to Horror Nights, and what are your thoughts if you have?
I go every single year. My son, my adult son, is one of the biggest horror fans in the world, and it's father and son weekend when we go to Universal Orlando every year. I love it, and obviously this is something that is resonating with fans because this will be the longest Halloween Horror Nights that Universal Orlando has ever presented, and also in the news, Universal is not only building this park, this micro park in Texas, but they're also building a year-round hunt experience in Las Vegas at Area 15. So obviously, people love horror. They love what Universal is doing with horror with its Halloween Horror Nights, and they're expanding it. And Six Flags, as both you guys probably know too, is instead of spring break, they're holding scream break at their parks and bringing back the haunts that we typically see in the fall for spring break. So this is something that is definitely a trend. And we're 2 days into spring, I think,
Yeah.
when Universal Orlando announced Halloween Horror Nights. So clearly, this is something that people are excited about, the park's excited about, and great to see.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
remember when tickets used to go on sale in August, then in July, then in June, and here we are in March.
Right. Yeah. When Halloween Horror Nights first started, I could be wrong about this. I believe it was one night. It was October 31st. It was Halloween Horror Night. I don't know that they called it that, but it slowly expanded. They quickly realized that they had a huge success on their hands, and my God, it's grown into this subgenre.
All right. So moving along, we're heading back to Dollywood, and it appears that their $299. How big is this apple pie that they sell? For those of you who have been there, you know what I'm talking about. But they sell a giant apple pie for $299 that I guess somebody uploaded on TikTok and has over 3 million views right now. So very few people buy the whole pie, but you can buy a slice that will feed 4 people, and that is $19. So
Yeah,
has anyone had the apple pie at Dollywood? I mean, any of
I
us
have
three, not
not had.
anyone in the world.
I've seen it, but I've not had it.
Yeah, I've seen it as well. I have not had it. It's mystifying to me. I do not frequent TikTok. It's just mind-boggling to me that 3 million people have seen this. Of course, I'm glad that you guys included in the information you provided to me that this was introduced in 2010. This isn't something that Dollywood just introduced, and it was introduced as part of its 25th anniversary, as you point out. And what made it unique is that it weighs 25 pounds for its 25th anniversary. It's an enormous pie. Keeping in mind, a typical apple pie is about 2 pounds. This is 12, 13 times the size of a normal apple pie. So people are probably outraged. Oh my God, it costs $299. But a $19 slice that feeds 4, that works out to what?
$5 a person
Like
ish.
450 a slice.
Yeah.
That's pretty reasonable, I think. And considering the cinnamon bread and everything else that Dollywood makes, I'm sure it's absolutely delicious and wonderful because all the food there is. So great for Dollywood for doing this. Have no idea why it blew up on TikTok.
Well, if you don't know, you don't know. My problem would be I'm not a big apple pie fan, so there's a little bit of a bias here. But to be
Mhm.
completely frank, if I stood there at the pastry shop in the front of the park, and even if I had $300 cash and I was sent by my boss to buy the apple pie, I'd probably just end up buying $300 worth of the cinnamon bread anyway.
That
So
was if I was gonna say, if it was
And
like
then
one
get
of
fired for insubordination, I
but
think.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't keep my job very long, but I'd have $300 for the cinnamon bread. So jokes on you. So it's funny because I actually had to call Dollywood over this past week to book my Dream More night, and the woman was giving me the rundown, and she was like, well, there's a Starbucks here, and oh, by the way, if you like our cinnamon bread, they sell it here. I was like, nobody likes your cinnamon bread. They love your cinnamon bread. So we had some fun with that. Awesome.
And you're going to love the Dreamore Resort, by the way, Ryan. It's great.
It's honestly, it's been a bucket list thing of mine ever since it opened. We have the availability. The price was right since it's still a little early in the season, and we needed a place to stay that night. So I'm super excited. But I'm definitely gonna be uploading photos and video to our social media posts and so on, and our YouTube to check out. Awesome, Don. Have you ever stayed at Dreammore?
I have not. Want to though.
You should.
Plan to.
Awesome.
Maybe over Thanksgiving I'll do that. Check it out.
Okay. Awesome. All right.
All right, Airy Force One set to open Friday at Fun Spot Atlanta. A lot of cool elements with this roller coaster. It's got the first ever what they call Raven Trust Dive. It's one of first of its kind zero G roll. It goes over an arcade, 146-foot first drop, 83-degree angle, top speed of 64 miles per hour, 3,400 feet of track. This looks like it's going to be a really, really fun coaster.
Absolutely, and the fact that it's at this little tiny park in outside of Atlanta is kind of amazing. This harks back to the original RMC iBox hybrids, which is the New Texas Giant and Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas, the two Texas coasters. Since then, RMC has introduced even bigger, faster our hybrid iBox coasters, but there's nothing to sneeze at with the original New Texas Giant, and this one rivals it. It's 154 feet tall, I think, as you said, Don, 64 miles per hour. This is a major, major coaster, and you may have said this, and forgive me if you did, but I believe that G-roll is the longest in the world. You're going to be upside down for quite a while. So yeah, it's it's going to be a major, major coaster, and certainly put this little tiny park on the map, I would think.
Yep, great logo, really cool colors, red, white, and blue. So looking forward to checking that out.
Yeah, and I think Don and I were discussing before on the air. I believe it goes over the arcade, so it's got a kind of cool element like that. Awesome. All right. So next up, it takes us up to Sandusky at Cedar Point. So we've got a little bit more information. Obviously, their Grand Pavilion is their biggest attraction this year, but you're having a pretty good year when the coaster is the second biggest attraction that you're adding that year. So their Wild Mouse coaster, which is set to open with the park in 2023, is going to have 6 cars, and we actually know their names now. Ziggy, Zaggy, Dizzy, Maisie, Chase, and Larry. So I believe 3 are going to be mice and 3 are going to be cheese. And they did a train reveal of one of the cheese cars at IAPA, so that was really cool to be there for that. Those look awesome. But 5 of the cars are going to be able to rotate 360 degrees, and then 1 is going to be a special car. Now, I wasn't able to figure out what a special car means, if it's just going to not spin or if it's going to do something special. So we'll have to figure out what that means. But man, Zamperla Wild Mouses, I'm so glad that they're a thing now. That they're still popular and they're still building them, because spinning this sensation of a spinning Wild Mouse is just insane, isn't it?
It is, and you could be right, Ryan. I'm not sure about this, but I believe that that 5 of the cars will be themed to mice, and 1 of the cars will be themed to cheese. I could be wrong, and maybe there's been more updated information released that I haven't seen. But how cool that they're each going to have an individual personality, probably individual colors and logos, and I think Zamperla and Cedar Point are having a lot of fun with this, as they should. It's going to be a fun family coaster, and I think it's great that they're doing this.
Yeah, and Zaggy and Larry have been on the track, so they're the first 2 to get on there.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm doing an image search right now on Google to see if I can get. I was under the understanding that 3 were cheese and 3 were mice, but I don't know that for sure. Maybe I was just assuming that.
I think there's 1 cheese car, and I think the rest are mice chasing.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Well, that answers it.
I think when they introduced it at IAPA, I think that's what they said. So I'm pretty sure that's the deal.
Okay. Well, it looks like Looks like I learned something today. All right. So, but would you agree, Arthur? Like, with Cedar Point, I feel like this is getting brushed over a little bit because it's not the tallest, fastest, whatever this year. But I think that the whole pavilion and that whole area, kind of bringing it back to almost like a boardwalk style, that's going to be the sleeper hit. I think that's going to be just wildly successful. What were your initial thoughts on that when you heard about the announcement?
I completely agree. And I think, it's funny that this brings us full circle to what we were talking about at the very beginning, that Cedar Point is the second continuously oldest operating park in the country. What was originally appealing about it was its lakefront location. And I know people, do make it down to the beach. Some people do, but many people don't necessarily. They park their car, they go into the park, they ride the roller coasters, they get back in their car and they go home, completely missing sort of the original intention of what Cedar Point was all about. This kind of reconnects, I think, maybe the park with the lake and harks back to its roots. The style of the architecture of that building goes back to the 1800s, and even though a wild mouse ride isn't necessarily a classic ride that goes back to the 19th century, it still is quite an old concept and a classic ride in its own right. So I agree. I think it's going to enliven that part of the park and, as I said, reconnect it with the lake and kind of reconnect Cedar Point to its roots, which is great.
Yeah, obviously it's not a wild mouse from, bygone years, but I think that the look and feel is what they were going for. But
Yeah,
I will say this. Cedar Point as a park is great, but Cedar Point as Cedar Point, Hotel Breakers, and the beach, that combo right there, you talk about sum of all parts. What a great combination to have.
yep,
Just fantastic.
yep. Agreed. Totally agreed.
Awesome.
All right. And moving on to the final of our pick six, it's going to be a big year at Dollywood. They're going to be opening Big Bear Mountain this summer and the new Heart Song Resort in the fall. So a lot of things, exciting things happening there in East Tennessee.
Yeah.
Yeah, Don, you were saying maybe in around Thanksgiving you might make it to the Dream War. You could actually also maybe make it to Heart Song instead and check out the brand new hotel, which looks equally as wonderful as the Dream War. How great that Dollywood has been expanding and has been obviously just gaining in popularity these last few years. It has become a destination resort in its own right, and I've always said that it kind of occupies this special place somewhere above the traditional regional parks and the destination parks that we think of like Disney and Universal. It's carved out this very special niche, and it only seems to be further reinforcing its unique and special place by bringing things like the new Heart Song Resort and this wonderful new coaster, which will be its longest one, Big Bear Mountain.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I've spoken about it several times on the show, but I'm very excited about Big Bear Mountain. Heart Song is just going to be fantastic, and you're right. I mean, for a park that, as far as like square footage is concerned, isn't insanely big, you're going to be able to support two large scale resorts like that. Good for them. My understanding is that the Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge area is one of the fastest growing tourist areas in the United States, and I think this is a huge reflection
Absolutely.
of that. You know.
Yeah, yeah, and probably most folks know this, but the Great Smoky Mountain National Park is the most visited national park in the country. And we're talking about Yellowstone and all these grand there's all these other parks that maybe have great name recognition, but that is the place, and it's by a factor of I don't know what. It's far and away the most popular national park. So people are just pouring into that area, and more often than not, they're visiting Dollywood when they go there, at least when Dollywood is open.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you mentioned how it's grown over the years. I was just looking last night. I had a box that I opened up. I got so much memorabilia and things at my house, but one of the boxes was slides of Dollywood from 1987.
Hmm.
So I'm going to scan those in, and but just holding them up to the light and looking at it, just how the park has changed since then.
Oh, it's changed dramatically. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and they do such a nice job of appealing on so many different levels. For people who are true Dolly Parton fans, there's much to love there. Even if you don't like roller coasters or thrill rides, people and the entertainment, I would put Dollywood up against any park, and that's including Disney, Universal, any of them. When it comes to entertainment, I don't know that anybody's on the same level as Dollywood. So for those two things alone, that's what makes Dollywood unique. It's entertainment and the fact that Dolly Parton is its namesake, and there's all this wonderful Dolly experiences that you can have there. But then on top of that, the level of thrills that they've introduced over the past few years, my goodness, it's a thrill ride lovers park in its own right as well. So it's got everything going for it, I think.
So, if I recall correctly, you've met Dolly. Didn't you interview her at some point?
I did. I used to joke that Pete Owens has been on the PR team there for many, many years. A wonderful guy.
Hmm.
You guys probably know him. And he was imploring me to come visit Dollywood. I had been writing about it, but hadn't visited. This is going back many years. And I used to joke with him, I'll agree to come visit if you can arrange for me to meet Dolly and I can get a hug with her. And sure enough, a few years ago, I went to the park. I was able to interview her, and I got this wonderful hug. I've got this great picture that I posted many times of me getting a hug from Dolly Parton, and it's a photo that I absolutely treasure. She's just as delightful as you would imagine in person. Refreshingly candid. She goes way off script, doesn't care what any of her PR handlers say, and God bless her for it. She's just great, and what a wonderful experience it
Yeah,
was to
yeah. I
meet
mean,
her.
you can do that when you have nothing to hide. Because the public persona of Dolly is for real, as far as I
That's
know.
right.
So why
Yep.
does she need to have a spokesperson when she speaks exactly what she's thinking? And she's not like nuts, so it's not like Kanye, where she might say something that's going to get her canceled, so
Yeah.
she's a very, very Southern, very real, very Christian woman, and she cares very deeply about the people that visit Dollywood. She cares very deeply about, Sevier County and where she grew up. And I think that she, more than almost anybody, has demonstrated, when you care about something and you're made successful marginally through it, you could argue, being from the Smoky Mountains, and you turn around and give it right back. I think that's a great example of that.
Well, Ryan, to maybe just put a pin on your point there, I think we all have a lot to learn from Dolly Parton, and I mean this
Couldn't agree
sincerely.
more.
I can't think of maybe any other celebrity, any other public person who is so beloved by virtually everybody. I don't care if you're from a red state, from a blue state. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. Everybody loves Dolly, and whatever it is that she's doing, I think there's a lesson to be learned there. If we could all be more like Dolly Parton and work together and join together, then I think this country, this world would be a better
I
place.
agree. Dolly for president, 2024. Calling it now.
There you go.
All right. So, Arthur, why don't you, before we wrap up, just one more time, like, plug your website, short description of what you do, just so people can go back and read more, because we've had a lot of interesting conversations, and I'm sure people want more Arthur.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Ryan, and thank you, Don, for inviting me on. It's a pleasure speaking with you and speaking to your subscribers, the people who listen to your podcast and watch you on YouTube. I have my own Substack. It's called About Theme Parks. You can find me at aboutthemeparks.fun. That's FUN. You can subscribe for free there, or you can become a paid subscriber and get my bonus content. As I said the last time I appeared with you guys, or with you, Ryan, I've been doing this for over 30 years now, and was writing about parks and attractions in traditional media like USA Today, and online for About.com and many other magazines and newspapers. And now I'm trying this new thing at Substack, and would love people to come along for the ride, as I like to say, and join me. And Twice a week, I send out content and try to keep current with what's happening in the industry, and try to visit as many parks and go on as many adventures as I can and share that with my readers, and would love to have you join me do that. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, Don, do you have any final words of wisdom or thoughts about themeparks.fun?
It's I enjoy. It's like a must read for me. I look at it every day and go back and read articles over and over again. Just some great insight. Highly recommend that you subscribe. And Arthur, we've enjoyed having you on the podcast, again, and we'll have to do it again soon.
Sounds good. Sounds
Awesome.
good. And thanks again for having me on, and keep up the great work.
Awesome.
You guys.
Thank you
Really,
so much.
really
So
great
just
job.
to wrap up one last time, Arthur's website is aboutthemeparks.fun. You can follow us on Twitter at attractions_GRP. Is your Twitter at about theme parks? Am I correct with that?
Yes.
Okay, so follow it's completely free to follow him on Twitter, just like us. So at about theme parks on Twitter. You can follow us on all the major podcast apps: Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on. Or you can search for us on YouTube. And our YouTube link is going to be it's youtube.com/at Attractions Group Podcast, or just search for the Attractions Group Podcast on YouTube. Also, before I forget, there are sponsorship opportunities, different packages available. You can sponsor things like the top of the show, a post roll, or even something like the Pick Six. So we got options available for 3, 6, and 12 months. Shoot us some DM on Twitter. We'll work something out with you. If you want to support the show directly, then you can make a small donation. There's a link in the description for our Buy Me a Coffee. If you can go on that, click the link, send us a couple bucks just to help this show be on the road. You know what I mean? Awesome. It's been a very, very long show, but it's been a very great show. That's why I can't talk anymore. But Arthur, thank you so much for being on again. Do you want to come back here in a couple months when we talk about what's open?
Well, I actually have already published my What's New for 2023, and now I'm in the process of visiting all those places and writing about them. So
Yeah, that's what we
I've
want to
already
talk
done my.
about. Is after you've been
I,
there, done that, and then we'll get the full
okay,
report.
okay, yeah, sure,
Awesome.
that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll do that. So we'll talk about once you make your tour of all the new rides, what you think of Area Force One, Big Bear Mountain, and so on. And we'd love to hear your opinion because you're one of the most well. I want to say well educated, but I don't want to sound like you went to Harvard. That's not what I'm saying. But one of the most well traveled theme park journalists, and it truly is an honor that you've come on the show twice now. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Right,
Well,
thanks.
everybody, thank you so much. This episode's going to drop a little bit early this week for those of you listening early on, but we'll be back next week with some fantastic content. Arthur, thank you again. Don, thanks for being my co host. Everybody, have a great week. Good night.